Okay, good. Here we are. So God bless you. Thank you for coming to church today. And because it's January, we began teaching creation, the divine principle of creation, and those aspects of it that we really appreciate. Today's January 14th, and the sermon topic is scientific evidence for God. Do you believe there's scientific evidence for God?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to show you some things like that. I'm Reverend Walter Frank, pastor of Heavenly Parents Holy Community, blessed central couple. And these are the children of our blessed central marriage, all these little kids here and grandchildren. So this is the identity I believe true parents wanted us to have. Children, grandchildren, many generations of children. So we hope and pray we all have many generations of children, right? That's our hope. 2. Interestingly enough, everybody here has read the Divine Principle book through at least once, right? Divine Principle doesn't begin with Bible verses. Divine Principle begins with the principles of creation and what's called the first cause. So I thought I'd like to share about that and the epiphany that true parents had about the first cause. So I'm going to start. We're going to show a video by Dr. Turek, who does a great job at pointing out that the Big Bang, or what we call Genesis 1, which is called the cosmological argument for a creator. And John Kennedy's going to do that right now, so go ahead, Big John. This is by Dr. Frank Turek, and I hope that you like it.
In about 7 minutes or so.
Yeah.
The universe is expanding, discovered by Edwin Hubble in 1929. Hubble deduced that if the universe is expanding, if you watched everything in reverse, you would see it collapse back to a point, mathematically and logically, to nothing. So the universe exploded into being out of nothing. The G stands for the great galaxy, the R stands for the radiation echo, discovered by accident by Penzias and Wilson, two scientists working at Bell Labs in Homedale, New Jersey. They discovered basically the radiation afterglow, or the remnant heat from the initial Big Bang explosion. The heat is still out there. It's just a couple of degrees above absolute zero. Now, good theories predict future discoveries. And they said if the radiation afterglow is out there and the Big Bang really did occur, we ought to find very fine temperature variations among the radiation afterglow. So they sent up a satellite in 1989 to circle the Earth. It's called the Kobe Space Satellite, to measure this radiation afterglow. And for 3 years they found nothing until they tuned their instruments just a little bit more precisely and found that there were temperature variations in the radiation afterglow, and they were down to 1 part in 100,000. George Smoot, the leader of the expedition, said if you're religious, it's like looking at God. Stephen Hawking said this is the greatest discovery of cosmology, perhaps the greatest discovery of all time. Those temperature variations allowed galaxies to ultimately form, so we could ultimately be here. The E in surge stands for Einstein's theory of general relativity, which says time, space, and matter are correlative. You can't have space without time, you can't have time without space and matter. And in effect, it says that the universe came into existence with space and time together. In other words, once there was no time, once there was no space, once there was no matter, and then bang, out of nothing, the universe exploded into being. What is nothing? Aristotle had a good definition of nothing. He said nothing is what rocks dream about. Nothing. There was no thing. There was not positive and negative energy, as Isaac Asimov has said. There was not a vacuum. There was not swirling mathematical points, as Dr. Atkins has said from Oxford. There was nothing, what rocks dream about, which means that the universe exploded into being, all space, all matter, all time, out of nothing. And several scientists have pointed this out. Stephen Hawking said almost everyone now believes that the universe and time itself had a beginning at the Big Bang. Agnostic astronomer Robert Jastrow, the man who sits in Edwin Hubble's chair, or who did until February when he died, he was an agnostic. He sat at Mount Wilson and looked through Hubble's telescope. He wrote a book in 1978 called God and the Astronomers. And here's what Jastrow wrote, or here's what he said actually in an interview. He said, astronomers now found they painted themselves into a corner because they have proven by their own methods that the world began abruptly in an act of creation to which you can trace the seeds of every star, every planet, every living thing in this cosmos and on the earth, and they have found that all this has happened as a product of forces they cannot hope to discover. That there are what I or anyone would call supernatural forces at work is now, I think, a scientifically proven fact.
Wow.
Why isn't an agnostic astronomer saying supernatural forces are at work? Why couldn't nature have created the universe? Because there was no nature. There was nothing, what rocks dream about, and then the entire space-time continuum leapt into existence. If it's not a natural cause, by definition it must be a supernatural cause, something beyond the natural. In fact, Arthur Eddington, the contemporary of Einstein, who was an expert in general relativity, said, quote, "The beginning seems to present insuperable difficulties unless we agree to look on it as frankly supernatural." So the cosmological argument leaves us with one question. Either no one created something out of nothing, or someone created something out of nothing. The atheistic view is no one created something out of nothing. The theistic view is someone created something out of nothing. Which view is more reasonable? I think Julie Andrews had it right. Nothing comes from nothing. Nothing ever could. That's the cosmological argument. The teleological argument, the design argument, actually has two arguments contained within it. It is the argument from design, and there are dozens of factors about the universe that are precisely designed for the existence of the universe and life. So not only did the universe explode into being out of nothing, it did so with incredible precision. Stephen Hawking has noted that the universe would not exist if there was a decrease in the expansion rate 1 second after the Big Bang by only 1 part in 100,000 million. This led Hawking to conclude it would be very difficult to explain why the universe should have begun in just this way, except as an act of God who intended to create beings like us. Not only is it designed in terms of its expansion, but the gravitational force is so precise. If you change the gravitational force by 1 part in 10 to the 40, nothing would exist. What's 1 part in 10 to the 40? Stretch a tape measure across the entire known universe. Set gravity at 1 inch on that, anywhere on that tape measure. If you move gravity, the force of gravity, 1 inch in either direction, we don't exist. There's also factors about our universe, in particular our solar system, that cannot be explained unless there's a designer behind it. For example, the Earth rotation, 24 hours, just right. If it was a little bit more, a little bit less, we wouldn't be here. The axial tilt, 23.5 degrees, just right. Change that a little bit, we're not here. The Jupiter being in its current orbit. If Jupiter wasn't there, we'd be bombarded with space material. Why? Because Jupiter acts as a cosmic vacuum cleaner. It attracts all the cosmic space junk to it rather than us. There are a number of other factors I don't have time to get into, but Arno Penzias, the man who co-discovered the R in surge, the radiation afterglow, said this: "Astronomy leads us to a unique event, a universe which was created out of nothing, one with the very delicate balance needed to provide exactly the right conditions required to permit life, and one which as an underlying, one might say, and one which has an underlying, one might say, supernatural plan." A friend of Christopher, atheist Steven Weinberg, who is an atheist, put it this way: "Life as we know it would be impossible if any one of several physical quantities had slightly different values." So not only is the universe precisely tweaked, and by the way, there would be no life unless the universe was precisely fine-tuned, as I just mentioned, but life itself is designed. Let me take you to your breakfast table for just a second.
Yeah, okay, close enough. So I like Frank Turek. He's a doctor of theology, and he gives these lectures to everybody. This was a debate with Christopher Hitchens, a noted atheist and anti-God, a Christian-hating human being. So I like this because here's the point. This is the point of the principle of creation, that even if we didn't have religion, you could still see and find God, right? So let's continue. So this is the universe. Let's read a few things about this. This is from Wikipedia. The cosmological argument in natural theology is an argument which claims that the existence of God can be inferred from the facts concerning causation, explanation, change, motion, contingency, dependency, or finitude with respect to the universe's sum totality of objects. A cosmological argument can also sometimes be referred to as an argument from universal causation, an argument from the first cause. By the way, principle of creation begins with studying the first cause, right? Is that interesting? The causal argument or prime mover argument, which whatever term is employed, are two basic variants of the argument, each with subtle yet important distinctions in essence and essentiality and very becoming. The basic premises of all these arguments involve the concept of causation. The conclusion of these arguments is that there exists a first cause, subsequently analyzed to be God. And by the way, almost all religions and all people somehow believe there was a creator, an omnipotent being who somehow created the world. And there's all kinds of different stories. Native Americans have stories about a woman and a man, or a coyote representing God's intellect. We come to the conclusion that there's one creation, as people call it, the Big Bang. They now call it the singularity. Isn't that an interesting term? Because what do we say about God? God is one. There's only a single God, and they call it the singularity because there's only one God. Anyhow, let's keep going. The reason I mention these things is the reason the principle of creation, the divine principle, begins with creation. For example, in 1905, Einstein published 2 articles on the special theory of relativity. Many other scientists agree. He cites Einstein's theory of relativity, which explains that our universe is a continuum of time, space, and matter. All came into existence simultaneously at the Big Bang, or what we call Genesis, right? There was no gravity before the Big Bang. There was no matter before the Big Bang. There was no laws of nature before the Big Bang, so all those things had to come from before the Big Bang. By the way, I've thought about this since I was a kid. You can't imagine what there was before the Big Bang. That's like there's just a big empty hole and then there's a point. No, the big empty hole was created by the Big Bang. Anyway, you can't imagine it. Go ahead and try. Maybe you can do it. Big Bang. So this was 1905, right? When we understand that matter, time, space all occur simultaneously at the Big Bang. In Big Bang event is a physical theory that describes how the universe expanded from an initial state of high density and temperature. It was first proposed in 1927 by Roman Catholic priest and physicist George Lemaitre, right? 1927. That was the first time he had a mathematical concept that maybe there was an origin and expansion of the universe. But what happened next was 1929, Dr. Turek cites Edwin Hubble in 1929 as the discoverer of the evidence, of the scientific evidence that the universe began. Hubble's law is considered the first observational basis for the expansion of the universe, and today it serves as one of the pieces of evidence most often cited in support of the Big Bang model or the singularity. Do you know why that's interesting to me? Because when did Reverend Moon go to college? Nobody, anyhow. 1940, right? So look, when he went to college, was all this information available if you're an electrical engineer going to Waseda University? Yeah, it was all completely available. It was in all the scientific texts. All engineers, doctors, scientists were reading and understanding this information. So Reverend Moon understood this when he was going to college. Dr. Turek cites Edwin Hubble in 1929 as the discoverer of the evidence. See, this is the difference. This is the discoverer of the evidence that the universe began. Hubble, for example, Jewish people, Moses, we always said the Bible tells us that there was a beginning of creation. And then scientists said, well, that's just crazy mysticism. That's just you guys believe in something that's by blind faith. Well, this isn't blind faith anymore, is it? Now there's evidence that the universe began. Hubble's law is considered the first observational basis for the expansion of the universe, and today it serves as one of the pieces of evidence most often cited in support of the Big Bang model, or what we would say the basic evidence for what? For Genesis 1. From Wikipedia, Robert Jastrow. In 1958, he joined the newly formed National Aeronautics and Space Administration as head of its theoretical division. Jastrow was the first chairman of NASA's Lunar Exploration Committee, which established the scientific goals for the exploration of the moon during the Apollo lunar landing. So he's a significant scientist, right? He's in charge of people landing on the moon. That was his job. In 1961, he became the founding director of NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies and served as director until his retirement from NASA in 1981. I want to specifically cite Jastrow because he remained agnostic. And we should understand that, right? Jastrow. Recent developments in astronomy have implications that may go beyond their contribution to science itself. In a nutshell, astronomers studying the universe through their telescopes have been forced to the conclusion that the world began suddenly in a moment of creation as a product of unknown, and later on he says, supernatural forces. It's supernatural because there's no natural forces possible. There's no matter, there's no gravity. There's no matter, if there are electrons and protons, there's no light. Nothing exists beyond the Big Bang, so it had to be supernatural. He continues, this discovery led directly to the picture of a sudden beginning for the universe. For if we retrace the movements of the moving galaxy backward in time, we find that at an earlier time they must have been closer together than they are today. At a still earlier time, they must have been still closer together. And if we go back far enough in time, we find out at a certain critical moment in the past, all galaxies in the universe were packed together into one dense mass at an enormous density, pressure, and temperature. Reacting to this pressure, the dense hot matter must have exploded with incredible violence. The instance of the explosion marked the birth of the universe. Robert Jastrow, the seed of everything that has happened in the universe was planted in that first instant. Every star, every planet, and every living creature in the universe came into being as a result of events that were set in motion in the cosmic moment, in the moment of the cosmic explosion. It was literally the moment of creation. And he uses capital C. He means creation from the Bible. God created this, right? He says, you can't doubt that now. The evidence says something, what we always call the first cause, that had no matter, no substance, created all the matter and substance. And we believe with a plan to create the kingdom of heaven on earth. This is British astronomer E.A. Milne, who wrote, we can make no propositions about the state of affairs in the beginning. In the divine act of creation, God is unobserved and unwitnessed. So none of us can see physically the mind of God. But like creation says, we can tell by the creation what the mind of God is like. Now we see how again, this is Robert Jastrow. Now we can see the astronomical evidence supports the biblical view of the origin of the world. The details differ, but the essential elements in the astronomical and biblical accounts of Genesis are the same. The chain of events leading to man commenced suddenly and sharply at a definite moment in time in a flash of light and energy. Right? Is that interesting? Because what does the Bible say? What does Genesis say? Genesis says, let there be light. The beginning, let there be light, and then there was light. Astronomy agrees exactly with the Bible. And they don't want to agree, believe me, they don't want to agree with the Bible. But they are forced to now accept that the Bible is correct. Far from disproving the existence of God, astronomers may be finding more circumstantial evidence that in fact God exists. Is that nice to hear? I like to hear that because I believe in God. And I believe that loving God is the greatest thing you can do in your life. Loving God, right? When Reverend Moon wrote the Divine Principle, and I'm going to talk about that in a second, one of the things he understood was the heart of God. That these scientists don't understand the heart. They can see the intellect of God, but they don't know about the heart of God. So far as I know, only True Father fully explained the heart of God, that God created for love. And if we don't love God, the purpose of creation isn't fulfilled. And if you do love God, then the purpose of your life is fulfilled, right? Most people wander around the earth wondering, why are we here? Why do we get here? What am I doing here? What's for dinner? Etc., etc. But True Father didn't think that. He thought, how do I love God? What do I do to love God and love human beings? Astronomers now find they have painted themselves into a corner because they have proven by their own methods that the world began abruptly in an act of creation to which you can trace the seeds of every star, every planet, every living thing in the cosmos and on the earth. And they have found that all this happened as a product of forces they cannot hope to discover. That there are what I or anyone would call supernatural forces at work is now, I think, a scientifically proven fact. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that what we believe? It's a scientifically proven fact that God is God and God exists. Here's one more. This is from Divine Principle. So if you read all those things and then you begin with Divine Principle, what does Divine Principle say? So this is the words of Reverend Sun Myung Moon, 1996 translation, Exposition of Divine Principle. I've been reading this one over and over again. Probing deeper still, we search for the ultimate cause which brought this energy with its elements of internal nature and external form into existence. This being would be the first cause of all the myriad things in the universe. See how scientists and True Father completely agree 100%? So let's read a little bit more to understand more deeply about this. This is the beginning of Divine Principle. We can know the Creator through creation. But this depends not upon what we see, but what we understand what we see. And this is Romans, for example, Romans 1:20. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen by some people, right? Being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse when they deny the existence of God. Next one. This is really sad to me because I really like Jastrow. I really like him a lot. But you know what he says? He says Jastrow expressed views on creation were that although he remained an agnostic, he never accepted the Christian God. He never accepted that. Agnostic means without knowledge. He says, I don't know that there's really a God or creator. There must be, but in my heart and in my mind, I don't know that being. Isn't that a tragedy? I just find it so tragic that he didn't find love of God in this. And not a believer. With the discovery of the Big Bang, Jastrow began to hold the belief that if there was a beginning to the universe, there was also a creator God, right? But he somehow couldn't get over that hump. And here's what I think about this. This is the book of Matthew 13:13. Jesus says, therefore, I speak to them in parables because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear. Right? That's Jastrow. I love Jastrow. I pray for him. He sees, but he doesn't see God. He sees there must be a creator, but can't see God. Right? And hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. This is the fall of man. This is sin. To receive all God's blessing of the air, the sun, the light, the food, all God, and not worship God. Because one of the rules of that Father taught us was give and take action. If I give you something, you should give me something back. That's the principle of give and take action, that all things exist based on give and take action. If you breathe in, you must breathe out. If you breathe out, you must breathe in. So God gives to us, when God gives to us, the idea that we don't worship God back, we don't give thanks to God, it's sad for God and it's unfortunately sad for us. Because loving God is the greatest thing you can do in your whole life. This is True Father. I like this particular picture of Father when he was a young man. He says, this is the beginning of his autobiography, I have lived my life with just one thought. I wanted to bring about a world of peace, a world where there are no wars and where all humankind lives in love. Perhaps some may say, how is it possible that you were thinking about peace even when you were a child? Is it so astonishing that a child would dream of a peaceful world? Well, again, I love True Father. I admire him. I say I worship Reverend Moon. His thoughts, his ideas have enlightened me and enlightened so many of us that I must appreciate that. So let's go to Father's autobiography and let me explain the heart of this message, right? We can see science, we can see those things, the heart of the message. This is from Father when he was growing up. What did he see in his neighborhood? What helped him understand and find God? He says this: my paternal great-grandfather worked at the farm himself, produced thousands of bushels of rice, and built the family fortune with his own hands. He never smoked or drank liquor, preferring instead to use that money to buy food to give to those in need. When he died, his last words were, if you feed people from all the regions of Korea, then you will receive blessings from all those regions. See? Did Father understand the principle of give and take action? Father absolutely, deeply in his heart, understand if you give out, you must receive blessing. To receive blessing, you must give out. So the guest room in our home was always full of people. Even people from other villages knew that if they came to our home, they could always count on being fed a good meal. My mother carried out her role of preparing food for all those people without ever complaining. Have you noticed that we serve lunch here every Sunday? And then anybody who comes here for lunch receives a free lunch, everybody who comes here for service. Do you know why? Because this is the principle. Father taught us this. You should always have a meal ready for guests. Always. So that's what we do, isn't it? Because we believe true Father. He says, my great-grandfather was so active, he never wanted to rest. If he had some spare time, he would use it to make pairs of straw footwear that he would then sell in the marketplace. When he grew old in his merciful ways, he would buy several geese, let them go into the wild, and pray that they would be well with his descendants. He hired a teacher of Chinese characters to sit in the guest room of his home and provide free literacy lessons to the young people of the village. The villagers gave him the honorific title Sun Ok, Jewel of Goodness, and referred to our home as a home that will be blessed. Isn't that beautiful? So these are some of the things surrounding Father in understanding God's heart and what it means to love God and why did God create. Now listen to this one. He says, by the time I was born and was growing up, much of the wealth that my great-grandfather had accumulated was gone, and our family had just enough to get by. The family tradition of feeding others was still alive. However, we would feed others even if it meant there wouldn't be enough to feed our family members. The first thing I learned after I learned to walk was how to serve food to others. Father says, as a child, I thought of the meadows as my home. As soon as I could wolf down my bowl of rice for breakfast, I would run out of the house and spend the entire day in the hills and streams. I could spend the day wandering about the forest with all the different birds and animals, eating herbs and wild berries, and I would never feel hungry. Anybody else grow up like that? Yeah, me, very similar. I grew up eating wild fruits and vegetables and some non-wild plants that belong to the neighbors. But we loved to do that, and it was so special. And I did have the same feeling Father had. I remember coming to plum trees or orange trees, and there's local trees and something called loquat trees, right? And me and my friends would pluck the fruit off those, and I would think, how did this get here? How did the universe conspire to make these delicious fruits that we love to eat in the middle of nowhere that we love to eat, right? And we love to eat those things. It made me really think, who or what is the creator? Reverend Moon says, as a child, I knew that my mind and body were at ease anytime I went into the forest. The reason I loved the forest was also because all the peace in the world dwells there. So we say, and this is very important to me, we can read about these scientists who see God in the laws of the universe, like Newton and other people. They see the laws of God. They see the laws of God. Father didn't see only the laws of God. He saw the heart of God. When he would eat those berries and eat that fruit, he would feel, God did this for me. God is my true parent. God is real. God is love. That's what he would feel, right? So Father saw God in the beauty of creation, not just the laws. Father says, I would often fall asleep in the hills after playing there. My father would be forced to come and find me. When I heard my father shouting in the distance, Yang Myang, Yang Myang, I couldn't help but smile, even as I slept. My name as a child was Yang Myang. The sound of his voice would awaken me, but I would pretend to still sleep. Right? You can see that, right? My kids do that sometimes. They're pretending to sleep, so I'll come and pick them up, and I say things, oh, baby's sleeping, I better not wake up the baby. And they start to laugh a little bit because they know they're tricking me, right? But that warmth of heart is so sweet. They know they're tricking me, and I know they're tricking me, but we still love each other. That's what Father's talking about here. His relationship with his Father was so sweet, right? Then he continues. Then he would hoist me onto his back and carry me home. That feeling I had as he carried me down the hill, feeling completely secure and able to let my heart be completely at ease, that was peace. That is how I learned about peace while being carried on my Father's back. See, Father had, now this is what I believe, this is just my belief about true Father. Father had the epiphany about the heart of God through his nature, through his father, through his mother, through all these experiences. He came to the conclusion of God's love. So true Father, for those here, the Catholics call Pope Holy Father, term meaning a man of God, goes out into the forest and finds delicious berries, nuts, and fruits rather what we might call and has what we might call an epiphany. That is, for example, let me give you an example of an epiphany. You've all heard of Isaac Newton, right? You've all heard of the apple story from Isaac Newton. You know where we get that story from? He wrote a letter to Descartes. Do you guys know who Descartes was? Descartes created analytical geometry. Analytical geometry goes from Descartes to Albert Einstein. Einstein, based on Descartes' analytical geometry, writes the calculus, creates the calculus, right? So he wrote a letter to Descartes about his experience with the tree and gravitational force. So it goes like this. Isaac Newton had an epiphany. He saw an apple falling from a tree. By the way, the tree's still there at Cambridge. And he understood. There's a force that attracts the apple to Earth, the moon and other planets to the sun, and one glorious year in Cambridge in his apartment wrote the law of gravitation. Newton understood that nothing comes from nothing and glorified God, God's intellect and God's mind as the origin of the laws of gravitation and the origin of the mathematics that allowed us to comprehend and utilize gravitation. Right? So suddenly, he's the one who wrote the laws of gravitation, figured out the gravitational constant, the weight of the earth, the weight of the sun. He figured out all these things in his apartment. You know, they had a plague. He had to be, like we had the COVID sequester. He was sequestered to his apartment. And during that 1 year in Cambridge, he wrote the calculus, the law of gravitations, the principles of optics, and he wrote them and put them in a book called Principia Naturalis, right? He changed the whole world. My point being, everybody sees apples fall from trees, or fruits fall from trees, right? None of you goes and writes the theory of gravitation based on seeing those things falling down, right? If you're eating an apple and you drop it on the ground, you don't think of the theory of gravitation. You think, doggone it, apple fell and now it's dirty, or whatever you think, right? We think like normal humans. Newton had what's called an epiphany, an enlightenment, where some sudden idea broke into his mind and his heart, and then he understood gravity and then explained it to us. So let me say it's the same, I believe the same with True Father. I think it's the same. Likewise, True Father's epiphany. When he was eating sweet fruits and nuts and berries in the forest, his epiphany was, how did they get there? Likewise, he understood nothing comes from nothing, and he understood that God created those berries and those nuts because God is the ideal loving parent of all mankind, of all human beings and all the animals and all the creatures. He could suddenly see, just like Newton could suddenly see gravitation throughout the universe. Father could see God's love throughout all the universe and all time. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that incredible? Right? Remember, he had also other stories where he watched and studied mother and father birds coming to feed the baby birds, and how hard they had to work to feed their chicks. Remember, he'd sit in the tree and watch the mother and father baby bird feed the baby birds, and then he understood. Where do they get a parental nature from? God. God must be a parent. God must be parental in nature. That means we must be the children of God, and God is our true cosmic parents, right? Nobody used those words before Reverend Moon. God is our true cosmic parent. God is our true parents. And I think that's why Jesus came specifically to Reverend Moon to talk to him about coming and teaching all these things to all human beings. So we can see that true Father sees, as Jesus uses the word see. Some people see without seeing. But true Father sees and understands God's nature, God's internal nature. Some people see without seeing and hear without hearing. On the other hand, some people see and understand, some people see and comprehend the goodness and glory of God, and that's who I believe true Father is, and of course our true Mother is. That they see beyond what we see, right? They see God in all His glory. We see things, read the Bible, and have some prayer life. But true parents have a kind of oneness with God that's beyond our comprehension. So we say, just like Newton wrote the Principia Naturalis, true Father wrote the divine principle for us. So other people could see. So other people could see and understand. He can open our eyes. So Father writes the divine principle, and we say true Father is like a man pointing to a beautiful sunset. When Father's pointing to the beautiful sunset, you don't look at this finger pointing, you look at the beauty of the sunset. Father gave us divine principle so we would see God. We would see God in everything we do, and everything we touch, and everything you eat, in all of nature, and all the beautiful things of life. Father gave us divine principle to point us to God's glory and God's greatness, so we would worship God. We would worship God from the depth of our heart. We would see God in everything we see, everything we do, everything we like, everything we have. Right? We say Reverend Moon sees and understands. Scientists can see the intellect and design of God. However, Reverend Moon saw the whole God. He saw God's heart. He understood God's heart as a creator wants his creation to respond and love him. Nobody knows that, right? Nobody knew that. Father taught us and taught the whole world that we need to respond to God's love as true children respond to their parents' love, right? Reverend Moon saw the whole of God, that God is love and family is the best expression of God's love on the earth. The image of God is Adam and Eve and children and marriages and grandchildren, and food is love. When you think of food, right, you read about food, it's all about nutrition. It's all about protein. No, Father says, no, it's not about vitamins, it's about love. Food is about giving and receiving love. Receive love from the food. Number one, receive God's love from the food. When he was eating berries in nature, he wouldn't just eat a berry, he was eating God's love. He was receiving God's love, and he's telling you that's what food is. Food is not nutrition. Food is God's love coming to you in the form of this object, this sweet fruit or apples or food or whatever it is. This is God's love entering your body. And we have to learn how to see that, right? Yeah, that's right. Okay, other principles of creation that we really need to understand. First of all things, God's heart is to love you and receive love back. So our goal on earth, as Jesus said, the first and greatest commandment is to love God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, understanding God, and with all your strength. That's the first and greatest commandment. And that's what True Father came to teach us about, how to amplify that so we see it everywhere. 2, growth is as necessary a part of God's creation. Most Christians think, like, for example, Christians think, many Christians think many people are predestined to hell. There's nothing that they can do but be predestined to hell. Some people are going to heaven, but many people are doomed, and there's nothing you can do about it. Right? Calvinism is called Calvinism. I'm not a Calvinist. I can't believe in Calvinism because I cannot believe the God who made fruit, sky, stars, all these beautiful things for us also is going to burn and torture people in hell forever. Right? So the universe grows, we grow, God is growing the kingdom of heaven on earth as we live. And we have to be able to see the growth as well as the evil. 2, human will is not only do we have free will, but our human will is necessary for God's will to be fulfilled. Most people think it's only God. God is in control of everything, and whatever we do doesn't count. Everyone said, no, absolutely not. Humans must make a foundation of faith and must make a foundation of substance and must receive the Messiah, our able figure, and make offerings to God through the Messiah. He says you have to do that. Our will, let's see. Our will is necessary for God's will to be fulfilled. As we come to know and love and practice God's will, the kingdom of heaven comes closer. That is, human will is necessary for God's will to be fulfilled. We are not robots, right? We are not robots. As we come to know and love and practice God's will, the kingdom of heaven appears on the earth. But as Father says, it takes our faith, our love to make that, well, you have free will to do all the evil you want, right? Until the police get you. But that's not the point. The point is, our goal is to do good and love God on earth. So we say, please, and this is really essential, important, please read and study our divine principle so that you can see, know, understand, and love God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and with all your strength. Amen?
Amen.
Thank you very much. I hope that's interesting to you.